wonder if you could look.
That's a great question, and that's something we're going to do in session.
Hello. Today I'm speaking with Jim Bowes, President of Peach State Integrated Technologies and also founder of NLDC. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you, Gene. It's great to be here.
You know, when you started NLDC, about 10 years ago, there certainly was no dearth of transportation and logistics conferences and organizations and associations. Why did you think a new organization was needed? What was lacking?
Great question, and thanks for asking. There's a lot of great, what I'll call trade shows or conferences in supply chain and logistics throughout the nation year-round. What we didn't see and what we couldn't find was a small, collegial, non-sales oriented conference where senior supply chain executives were speaking and teaching other senior supply chain executives in a very safe and transparent environment. And so the three things that we wanted to do when we launched the National Logistics and Distribution Conference 3 years ago was, number one, create an atmosphere that was collegial and that it was safe and it was transparent for senior supply chain executives to come to, where they could connect with their peers and they could build long-lasting relationships and they could hear from each other so that they could pick up the phone later in the year and call one of their peers and say, hey, I've got a new initiative, or I have a new challenge that I'm facing. Do you have any thoughts on that? The second thing was that we wanted to provide relevant content to senior executives. So if you go to a lot of trade shows, maybe the content is more geared for the middle managers and down. Very few shows are really focused on vice presidents, senior vice presidents and up. And so we wanted to tailor the content for that level of executive. And so over the last 10 years, we've had inside the industry and outside of the industry experts come in and speak to the senior supply chain executives. And lastly, but not least, we wanted to give back. You know, this is my 30th year in this business, and it's been very good to us and my family and our company, and it was just a way for us to give back to the community. And so we were excited to do that. Fast forward 10 years later, we're very blessed and very excited that the NLDC continues.
Well, looking over those 10 years, tell me how the issues have changed. How have the things, that these the top level executives you're talking about, the things that were on their minds over this span of time, how has it changed?
Well, I think one of the things that hasn't changed is, the labor force. So that'll continue to be an obvious challenge. But think about the things that have changed over the last 10 years. The iPhone didn't come out until June of 2007. It's not even 7 years old yet. Think of the impact that smartphones are. Over 1 billion smartphones out there today. There's almost 1 billion in China users using smartphones. That has created what we call the digital consumer and the digital native. And it changes everything for supply chain executives. You've heard of omni-channel or multi-channel, but the digital consumer wants to order what they want 24/7. They want it delivered wherever they're going to be, and they want to return it with no hassles. And that has changed significantly. I think the driver and transportation issues that we have in our country are going to continue to be a big issue. But the Google car now has almost 1 million miles on it. And what they're forecasting between now and 2025 is that there's going to be caravans of trucks going down the road where the first is a human-driven truck, and then there'll be 2 or 3 or 4 trucks right behind it in sequence following it. So I think transportation has always been its biggest spend for supply chain, but how do we leverage the assets and how do we leverage the technology to make sure that we can deliver our products and goods? The advent of rail is becoming more and more prolific, particularly with the transportation and infrastructure challenges. Some of the other challenges back then was automation. I think, when it kind of goes back to labor, but if you have a facility that runs 24/7, 365, you are maybe a plant attached to a manufacturing facility, it could be temperature controlled, it could be union. Automation really starts to make a lot of sense. It's very reliable, the cost is coming down, it performs 24/7, lights out facilities. We just did a project for Dannon out in West Jordan, Utah, where that is exactly what happens. And they're very, very quickly justified. I think what you're also seeing is the use of AGVs to replace, fork truck drivers. So these are 32-foot, high lift equipment that run 24/7, 365, never miss work, never make a mistake, always go to the right place. Again, very reliable and very justifiable. So automation and equipment is another area I think that has really transformed over the last 10 years from my perspective.
How good are you at looking into the future? I wonder if you could look 10 years ahead for a minute. What changes do you think we'll see?
Well, that's a great question, and that's something we're going to do in session 5 today at our conference, is talk about supply chain 2025, because if you think about it, 9/11 was only 13 years ago, and it seems like yesterday. 2025 is only 11 years from now, and it's going to be here before we know it. But I think the whole idea of driverless transportation is going to be in full force in 11 years, whether it's cars or trucks. It's going to be very interesting. I think that the use of technology, for instance, last week, Amazon introduced what they call their Dash. It's a wand, and they're going to give it to you and me for free to use in our home. And we're going to scan barcodes in our home, and we're going to place orders to replenish the inventory in our home, and they will probably bring it to your door that day, because that's why they're putting million square foot facilities in every major market in the United States. I think 3D printing is going to be very interesting to follow. If you want to make auto parts, replacement auto parts, if you think about a distributor or manufacturer of auto parts that has to keep, this tremendous, we call it the long tail, 400, 500, 600,000 parts in inventory. Well, what if you can just make the one for the 67 Corvette in the next 20 minutes in your shop and have it ready? That really impacts the amount of space you need, the inventory, the carrying costs, the people. It's going to be really interesting to watch what 3D printing has to do in the future.
Absolutely.
I think those are some of the big ones. I think the whole idea of omni-channel commerce will continue to evolve. Labor, I think, will continue to be an issue. So automation, I think, will become more and more prevalent in the years ahead. The thing that's interesting to me that might really ripple through multiple marketplaces is what happens to malls when e-commerce is 30 or 40% of all retail sales. Will people go to the mall? How do we disposition these pieces of real estate? What do they become?
Very interesting.
How we've got a bunch of malls here in Atlanta, and I can tell you that my mother and my wife and I myself rarely ever go to the mall.
Right.
We would rather just order with our smartphone and have it delivered to the house or to the office than go to the mall. So the whole idea of real estate and repurposing real estate in the next 10 years is going to be interesting. I know there's some cities and municipalities around the country that are putting some very strong tax incentives in place to repurpose these vacant strip malls or shopping centers. They could become town centers where they build condos and communities, and it's very valuable real estate in most cases. It'll be interesting to see how they repurpose real estate, and it's all driven by the digital consumer.
Right.
And as people continue to grow, or as our population continues to grow to 400 million people from 300 million in the next 25 years, and they continue to migrate towards the cities, the whole idea of the last mile delivery becomes that more complex, because we'll be delivering to a high rise right there,
Right.
as opposed to my home on the residential street.
Right.
So transportation becomes more complex. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be fun.
A lot of great food for thought. Thank you so much for being with us today.
My pleasure, Gene. Thank you for having me.
I've been speaking with Jim Bowes of Peach State Integrated Technologies and NLDC. Thank you for watching.